Hi there. In this episode, we'll discuss why the SNP are not a real political party and why they were destined for failure. And before I start off, just as usual, could I ask you to do me a favour? If you enjoy the channel, please hit the subscribe button. If you like any particular video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to be notified of when we release any more videos, click the little bell logo and you'll be notified when videos are released. So, to discuss the SNP not being a real political party, I think it's worthwhile to start off looking at the history of the party to maybe explain why they are where they are just now. Now, surprising to most of you, or a lot of you, probably surprised to hear that the SNP were founded in 1934, 90 years old. Back then it was two similar named parties, the National Party of Scotland and the Scottish Party, amalgamated. Both of them were fledgling parties, 2 or 3 years old each, and they got together in 1934. Obviously soon after we had the outbreak of war, and they hit their sort of first bit of controversy. The then leader, Professor Douglas Young, who was SNP leader from 42 to 45, campaigned for British people to refuse conscription, and his activities were popularly vilified as undermining the British war effort, so much so that Professor Young was imprisoned for refusing to be a conscript. This is the guy who went on to lead the party, 42 to 45. They also had their first split in 42 because they failed to change the party's policy from supporting all-out independence to home rule. This obviously caused a difference of opinion with those at the top of the tree, and there was a split, and some of the members went on to form the Scottish Covenant Association, non-partisan political organisation campaigning for the establishment of devolved Scottish Assembly. During the war, this allowed them to gain their first victory at elections, and they won a seat at a by-election in Motherwell. 1945, Robert McIntyre became an MP, and as usual, even in today's times, by-elections are not taken as seriously by much of the voters, because it's not going to really affect how a country's run, and it can sometimes be seen as a sort of revolt vote rather than anything else. And this is a great example of that, because the MP, Robert McIntyre, lost his seat 3 months later when the big proper elections came by, with the general election. So their first success was short-lived and understandable. So they went through 40s, 50s, not a lot of action. 60s started getting a little bit of success, electoral success, getting credible results in some of the Glasgow areas at elections through the 60s, and eventually Winnie Ewan became a surprise victory in another by-election in Hamilton, and she went on to have a decent career as an MP, to be fair. So she was probably the first serious victory for them. And then through the 70s they became more noticeable, getting a wee bit more success, by-elections, council elections, and that's when they started getting into council campaigns. But it was around about the 80s before they started getting control of any councils. That became one of the sort of main things then. In the 80s, a wee bit of infighting. The 79 group was formed. They felt they wanted to decide, as the party was seen as pretty central up until then, and they wanted to take a more left-wing and socialist approach to the party to gain more mainstream followers and try and become a serious party. So what was prior to then more central and possibly at sometimes slightly to the right became more left-wing. And then we came into the 90s and Alex Salmond era, which seen them first victories at Scottish level, where they started getting seats in a lot of councils and started seeing some success in government. And then in 2007, they became the largest party in the Scottish Parliament, but didn't have a majority. And that went on until May 2011, when they did actually win an overall majority with 69 seats in the Scottish Parliament. So they became a coalition 2007 and sole control 2011. And this sole control came about for a wee bit of time until the referendum of 2014. Now, the party had been built up over 80 years to try and get to that point. All of the time, they weren't a proper political party. They were activists. That was it. Activists that seen politics as you know, the way to get change, obviously, to independence. And they became protesters and activists, really, and that was about it. And then, eventually, they got enough support to have some say in the Scottish Government, and then 4 years later, overall control. And at that point, you would think they would grow up and change. Because if you look at the life of the party as a foot, their time in power is about an inch. So you would think that they would have learned from that. They would have been away from being a one-trick pony, that all they spoke about was it. It was independence. And there's some evidence in that in some strange places. They have some branches of their party, namely the youth wing. And unlike, say, the Tory party, who have the Young Conservatives and, you know, stuff like that makes sense because it ties it into the party. Strangely enough, the youth wing of the SNP is called Youth Scots for Independence, which suggests it's a rather short-term thing, but why would you not just call it Youth for SNP or Young SNP or such like? But to actually have that name tells you a lot about the party. They are a one-trick pony, and all they want to do is be activists. The LGBT wing of the SNP is called Out for Independence. Again, giving you an idea of their true intentions. They're not interested in governing countries, they're interested in one single thing, and that is independence, so much so that two of their bodies have just called for independence, which I find absolutely bizarre. So what happens then is you become, you know, for a large 90% of your time as a thing, you are activists protesting and in opposition. And that's it with SNP. When they became the party of power, they never changed. They never put the big boy pants on and sat down and said, now we need to manage a country. We don't have to be constantly activists and protesting. We now can be the big boss and make all the decisions. But they've never been able to get away from that. All they want to do is get independence for Scotland by any means. They don't actually care. They will tell lies that we've shown before in previous videos. They will make things up. They constantly blame others for their inadequacies. And in another video that I'll probably produce today, I'm going to talk about the failures since they came into power. And it's an astonishing list. And the cult that I've already described in previous videos, they don't accept any of it. Every single failing of the SNP is easily blamed by them on Westminster. They hardly hold a conversation without talking about Westminster. They are totally inept of looking after the power that they have. They constantly go on about how bad Scotland is, and 99% of the time the things they're talking about are devolved powers that they can actually attend to. But they are just a sham, a total sham of a political party. And I'll give you an idea of how I can prove they are just nothing more than activists. Activists don't really need to concern themselves about the end result. I was active in a situation a few years ago where I wanted change in an organisation. My job wasn't to once that organisation had change, to run that organisation. My job was just as a supporter of that organisation, just to have a assist in a change of power. Because the people that can help change the power are not necessarily the best people in place to be in charge of that power once it's achieved. And that is the SNP in a nutshell. They just have no idea on how to govern because they can't get away from this protesting type arrangement that, you know, they're 80 years of their existence brought about. And I think that the majority of Scots, if they're not already, are actually understanding that now and can see them for all they're worth. Even people that want independence are falling out with the SNP, and their membership is a good barometer of that. And the comments from people who see themselves as wishing independence, completely removing themselves from the party. And I cannot wait until we have an election for the Scottish Parliament, because I truly believe that the Scottish people, not just the unionists like myself, but the Scottish people in general, have had enough. And it will only be the cult of their followers, the brainwashed of their followers, that can't see through them, that don't actually have any problems with fraudulent claims, arrests, investigations into their management and funds, missing funds, the sham that was the Alex Salmond case, where there seemed to be the party determined to influence that man's case. And it's only the most neurotic of their cult that are actually able to just totally ignore these things. And when you discuss these things with them, their response will always include the word Westminster within the first 10 words that they use in retort. And these people, fortunately, are in the minority, and a reducing minority within Scotland. So myself, as a proud unionist and a proud Scot, I can't wait till we have an election. Bring it on.